provide you with. So again, welcome everyone to the nuts and bolts of Pre-ETS programming development. My name is Olaya Landa Villar, and I'm the director of the Connect Center. I just wanted to let you know again of some of the information that is going to be in your chat box. And what I also want to know, before I move forward, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat box, but make sure that on your in the area where it says to, that you change that to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see your questions or comments. Okay. And then we also have an event calendar that we'd love for you to visit at www.aphconnectcenter.org/events. You can also put your own events on that calendar. It's open for the entire field, so please feel free to share any events that are going on in your area. And we also have a link to any of our recordings of our webinars, and that link will also be in the chat box. So again, welcome. I am going to start out by launching a poll because we want to see who's joining us today. I just launched it. What we'd like to know is your job title. How many O&M specialists or TBIs or AT specialists we have. If we have any early intervention teachers, adult consumers, vision rehab therapists or teachers or specialists, college faculty or state administration. If we have any students in a college program, parent or guardian. We also want to know where you're from. Northeast US, Southeast US, Northwest US, Southwest US, Midwest US, US territory, Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. And how did you hear about us? How did you hear about the webinar? Was it through the Connect Center website, email, APH emails, from a university faculty member, the ACVREP website, a friend or colleague, social media, or other? So about half of us have voted. I'll give us a few more seconds to get a few more responses so that we get a really good idea of who's joining us today. Okay. All right, I'm going to end the poll now and I'm going to launch the results. Everybody can see. So about 40% of us are TVI, O&M specialists, and AT specialists. Not everybody answered the question, so we had about half of the attendees answering the questions. So, but of those half, 40% are TVI, O&M specialists, AT specialists. Adult consumers, we have some vision rehab specialists, therapists, some teachers, some college faculty, state admins, student in a college program, and parent or guardian. Welcome. So glad to have you here with us. Okay, let's go down to number 2. Where are you from? The Northeast US, looks good. Southeast, okay, we've got a pretty good mix there. Northwest US, Southwest US, we have a lot from the Midwest, so that's where I'm at. I'm in Illinois right now. Good to see the Midwest represented there. And let's see, so we don't have anybody internationally, and that's okay. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Maybe this particular topic is more specific to United States, but either way, they would have access to the recording if they want to learn about it. And how did you hear about the webinar? The Connect Center website, mostly from the APH email. So that's good. Well, at least we know that's working. The ACVREP website, some friends or colleagues, social media, and others. So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing these results. Thank you so much for answering those questions. And now we have a good idea of who's with us today, and I'm gonna let our presenters take over from here. So go ahead, Richard.
All right, did we put the opening code? Did you put that in the?
Yes, we've already done that. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Olaya, and good morning and good afternoon to those of you joining us. My name is Richard Rudd. I'm with the APH Career Connect, and I'm really excited to be a part of our second National Transition Conversation webinar. As some of you may recall, we started this back in July, and we're really excited to be doing this again in 2021. And I want to welcome you all to the participating. At the end of our webinar, I'll be saying a little more about the National Transition Conversation and some resources with that. But today, I'm pleased to be welcoming our guests from Michigan, Shannon, Sue, and Jaclyn with Michigan Bureau of Services for the Blind, to talk to us about Pre-ETS, pre-employment transition services, and some of the really cool and innovative things that they're doing, and some of the things that we can learn from that, from what they've done. And having met with them recently, we're really pleased to know that they're really doing some good stuff in Michigan, and I hope you all can take away some really good resources from them. So as we said, we'll put in questions in the chat box, and towards the end, you'll have your questions answered. So good afternoon, Shannon, Sue, and Jaclyn. I'm going to hand it over to you, and welcome again to Career Connect and our National Transition Conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. As he said, I'm Shannon McVoy. I am the Transition Services Manager with the Michigan Bureau of Services for Blind Persons. And I've been in this role for a while, pretty much since the start of WIOA, and since it was implemented so that we could really focus more on providing transition services to youth. So I'm going to turn it over to Jackie and Sue to do a quick introduction, and then we'll jump into the presentation.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jaclyn. It's a real pleasure to be with you all today. I am a vision rehabilitation therapist or rehab teacher with Michigan BSBP. And I first was working with Shannon solely in the transition realm, looking at planning transition programs and then also implementing those transition services and providing those to our young students. And now I also teach individuals of all ages, but I still have a passion, very much so, for transition.
Hi, I'm Sue Wazensky, and I'm a departmental specialist that handles projects bureau-wide with the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons. And I'll be sharing later in the presentation regarding the Pre-ETS program planning budget template that we've created. So thank you.
Thanks, Sue and Jaclyn. I wanted to do a kind of a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about with you today. You know, one of the things that we learned early on, you know, we were fast and furious trying to get programs up and running, trying to, you know, start, figuring out how to utilize the Pre-ETS funds and getting programs up and running. But we didn't have a lot of processes and procedures in place. So today what we're going to be doing is going through a program that we actually developed and ran in Michigan, which I'm really excited to share with you, and we'll hear more about that in a minute, but also some of the tools that we've put together with our staff. And I do see in the chat, you should be getting a copy of the PowerPoint and then some of the tools that we're going to be discussing throughout the program today. So you should also have access to those. So some of our objectives today are, you know, basically how do you take a concept and then develop it into an actual pre-employment transition program for students with disabilities, or specifically students who are blind and visually impaired. You'll be provided with some tools to assist you in your own program development that we hope we will use, and that you will send us some feedback. And we also are hoping that you'll have a greater understanding of the importance of collaboration for voc rehab agencies, which is what Jaclyn, Sue, and I work for as our state vocational rehab agency, partnering with education, our community rehab organizations, centers for independent living, advocacy groups, and other members of the community that really can help you to enhance your program. So that's kind of our three main goals for our program today. So I am hoping that the 50 some of you that didn't actually respond to the survey was because there was no rehab counselor choice. I'm hoping the rest of you are rehab counselors, but I guess we'll never know. So just in a nutshell, I hadn't planned to talk a lot about pre-employment transition services, so I'm hoping that you have some familiarity. But The Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act was an amendment of the Rehab Act. And basically it was, it really put an emphasis more on transition services, and also requires that voc rehab agencies would set aside at least 15% of their federal allotment to provide funds for these pre-employment transition, or pre-ETS, as we will be referring to them throughout the presentation, to students who are students with disabilities who are either eligible for VR services or they're considered potentially eligible. So, you know, the potentially eligible students, we know they have a disability. They're getting services through an IEP or through a 504 plan. So they're in the school and they are, you know, we know they have a disability, so we don't have to do a full eligibility. So that's why they're considered to be potentially eligible for VR services. So we have 5 categories of pre-ETS. We have job exploration counseling, workplace readiness training. Workplace readiness training, because I know those of you who are on the call are a lot of VRTs and VR Cs and O&M specialists. The workplace readiness really encompasses all of those independent living skills, the soft skills that students need to be employed. The O&M falls in that category as well.
All the skills of blindness.
All the skills of blindness. Thank you. She knew I was struggling. Jackie's going to jump in when she knows I don't know what I'm saying. So then we also have work-based learning experiences, and that could be anything from a job shadow, an apprenticeship or an internship, to a full paid work experience. We also have counseling on post-secondary options. So looking at what options are available for our students after they leave the education system. They can either go on, you know, to possibly some college or university or some other type of a tech program, or they might just be going on straight to employment. So the last category is self-advocacy, and that's where your leadership skills, your you know, understanding of what your disability is and how to tell other people what your accommodation needs, that all falls under the self-advocacy category. How are pre-ETS students served? So we're primarily serving them in either a group setting. Sometimes that can be done in a program or a training center where Jaclyn works, where you're able to bring groups of students together. Sometimes in the school, if you have enough students that you have a group. Michigan is kind of rural, so a lot of our areas, we only have like 1 kid. So getting together a group isn't always conducive. So we also are able to provide individual services to our students based on their needs, working with their counselor or with a VRT. There's a lot of opportunities that we can do independently with the students. We also are partnering with our local education agencies. That's a huge part of WIOA, is making sure that those partnerships exist. And then we can also do vended or paid services through either a community rehab partner, a center for independent living, or something of that nature. All right, so this next slide, for those of you who can't see the screen, it's a street sign. And on the street sign, it says lost, confused, unsure, unclear, and it's got the arrows going in all kinds of different directions. Because what we found, unfortunately, is that programs just don't organize themselves. So we wanted to, we were getting a lot of questions. You know, our unit was developing some programs statewide, but we also had local counselors, teachers, school districts that really wanted to do some of their own programs and set some things up. So we wanted to provide them with a tool and some different things and step-by-step on how do they do this, so that we could help them to be able to start developing their own programs. So our guide is basically, like I just said, you know, some of the concepts in there are a step-by-step process from concept to implementation. We've got our budget template, and then we've also got a checklist for our staff, just so that they kind of can stay on track throughout the entire process. So Jaclyn's going to talk about this really cool program that we did. And throughout the discussion, we're going to be jumping from examples from this particular program to like step by step how you would do this as you're developing a new program and kind of the steps in our guide.
All right, thank you, Shannon. So I'm not at all biased, but I think every program that we have done through BSBP has been awesome. But one of the coolest ones that we did, and also one of the most complicated, was our 21st Century Transportation Conference. And this program we actually developed and implemented before we had all of these tools to help stay organized. And it was through developing this program that we determined, hey, these programs don't organize themselves. We really, really would benefit from some of these tools. And so as we outline the program and the tools, it kind of shows you how that tool is helpful. So this program concept of our 21st Century Transportation Conference was this. They can really come from anywhere. Any person can come to have an idea of what would be a great program. And it starts by just looking at what are the services that are currently provided to our students and where is there a gap in service? Is there a need that we need to fill? And so for our 21st Century Transportation Conference, someone outside of our agency, actually from the NFB of Michigan, came to us and said, hey, it would be really cool if we explored all the careers and technology related to autonomous vehicles, those self-driving cars. Not only is this, a really up and coming field, but it's really interesting. And I think that our students would be interested in learning more about this. So we ran with that. We said, yeah, we can absolutely make a program using this. And so we developed partnerships in order to pull this thing off. So Shannon and I, were part of the Michigan Bureau of Services for Blind Persons, but we worked with the NFB of Michigan, the University of Michigan, Center for Occupational Health and Safety Engineering. Sorry, it's a little bit of a mouthful. M-City, which is a testing ground for autonomous vehicle technology through the University of Michigan. So it's where they bring all of these vehicles and actually test them out in real life kind of environments, as much as they can simulate that. We also partnered with Michigan Parents of Children with Visual Impairments and the local Center for Independent Living in the Ann Arbor area. We also had contacts with the Human Resources Department from General Motors. And so all of us together came and were able to make this program happen. And we could not have done it with near as much success without these partnerships. So our planning team, after you develop a concept, you need to figure out who you're going to have on your team, because no one person can pull all this off. So you sit down and determine who do you need on the team. And then once you have an idea of just your starting lineup, shall I say, you start to define the roles and responsibilities of those different team members. As things move along, you may determine that you need more people, more expertise, and so that team could grow. It doesn't have to stay with just those, small number of people that you started with. And it may very well be necessary to grow throughout the process. Things often become more complicated than you initially think they're going to be. Responsibilities of the planning team. When you sit down together, you need to develop your program goals and objectives and who's your target audience. Without those things, you're not going to be able to make sure that your program accomplishes what you need it to do. Then you need to develop a timeline. What are some benchmarks or deadlines for yourselves? Because what we have found in planning some of these programs is you set a target date for when you want the program to happen, and that date approaches really quickly. And so it also helps to have those benchmarks, those target dates, so that you don't get behind the 8 ball and be rushing toward the end to accomplish things so that your program can happen as scheduled. Then you need to develop an agenda. What sorts of activities are you going to have in this program so that, again, you can accomplish what you need to reach your objectives and your goals and provide that service to the students that you want to do. In making that agenda, you need to make sure it aligns with Pre-ETS categories. those different areas that Shannon outlined, like workplace readiness training, self-advocacy. Each of those activities needs to tie into those areas. Then once you have your agenda, you can start to identify specific speakers and resources that you might need in order to make that agenda happen. Determining a budget, identifying a fiduciary if needed, so someone to help roll all of those small costs into one large program cost instead. There's a lot of moving parts to a program, like we said. So Shannon's going to talk about some of the overarching program goals, who our target audience was, et cetera.
Right. So yeah, so one of the most important pieces that you want to do as you're developing a program is really figure out what are we trying to accomplish here? Like, why are we even having this program? So if you, it's a cool idea and it sounded really cool, talk about these self-driving cars and ride on one. I mean, that sounds really fun, but what are the things that we want the students to get out of coming and participating besides a fun ride on a self-driving car? So when we sat down and we had all kinds of ideas, right? So we had a bunch of people and they were very excited about this idea. And oftentimes, we had to kind of rein them back in and just make sure that everything was aligning. So this particular program, we were focusing on introducing our students who are blind and visually impaired to emerging careers in the autonomous vehicle industry, as well as to explore some of the education and skills that they would need to be able to become competitively employed in the transportation industry. So, we talked about several different types of employment opportunities throughout there, but that was our kind of our overarching goal, was really to introduce them to the technology and also to employment in that field. Then we had to look and see, okay, who is our target audience? Like, who do we want to serve? Which students are we going to market this program to? Who's a good fit to come and learn this information? So for this particular program, we were looking at transition age students who are blind or low vision. We also included some parents in this because we had some younger students and it really worked out nice to have families there. I'm a proponent of the earlier, the better when it comes to career exploration and getting students some of that information that they need to really think about what types of employment that they want to go into. I mean, as most of you probably know, if a student doesn't follow some of the right path when it comes to classes they're taking in high school, they're not going to be ready to go on to post-secondary. So, getting some of those younger students in there was kind of a bonus for us. So we also had vocational rehab specialists, educators, consumer advocacy organizations. We had the Michigan Parents of Blind and Visually Impaired Students and NFB. And then we also had members from industry, government, academia, that work on developing this technology as well as providing the vocational training. Some of our conference objectives. So what do we want to accomplish? For this particular program, we wanted to explore emerging and in-demand careers in the auto industry. Michigan is a big auto industry. I'm sure you know that state. And so we do have a lot of jobs that revolve around either building parts or, working, there's so many components to the auto industry, right? So we wanted to also give them an overview of the auto industry and the new technologies and innovations that surround these self-driving vehicles. And we wanted to include some hands-on activities. One of the things that was really exciting that we were able to do is riding in this shuttle that goes around the campus of the University of Michigan and exploring the M-City that Jaclyn mentioned earlier, which is the testing grounds of the autonomous vehicles. We also wanted the students to meet some professionals who were blind and visually impaired that were working in various capacities within the auto industry. And learning from industry leaders. Let's see. Okay. So the next one was resourcing and agenda development. So, we had our overarching goals, we had our target audience, and then we needed to figure out, okay, what activities are we going to do throughout the few days that we have the kids together And how can we make that happen? So we started exploring speakers. We wanted to identify different resources that team members could bring to the table. One of the great things was, we had a really diverse team and they had some good connections. So like our NFB of Michigan affiliate, he had a good contact with the president of NFB, Mark Riccobono, and we were actually able to get him to come in and speak to our students. At the end, there is a link to the actual website that we developed, so you can check that out later too and see kind of a lineup. We had some really pretty amazing speakers coming. We wanted to also consider options to make sure our students stayed engaged. So we wanted to make sure that we had a balance between sit and get type information where they have a speaker and they're talking about a topic, and some actual hands-on exploratory activities that they could do. And then we also wanted to make sure, again, that all the activities, all the speakers that were on our agenda for 3 days, I think it was for 3 days, supported that overarching goal. So that was kind of where we're at with that. So Jaclyn's going to talk a little bit about the program implementation.
All right. So much of my job when I was developing a lot of these programs, and as I continue to do so, I learned, and you will learn as well if you haven't done a program already, that the devil's in the details. There are a lot of things that go into implementing a program. So first we developed that agenda to meet those program objectives that the team made together. Then you contact your speakers and confirm all the arrangements for getting them to come and speak at your program. And you may not confirm the first speaker that you contact. So that might be a lot of back and forth communication just there. Then you obtain some quotes for different services and outline a preliminary budget. All of those different services in a budget, you align those to your pre-employment transition service categories, and then provide all the cost information for IPE development and authorizations to your voc rehab counselors so they can pay for the students to attend. And so the program can actually be funded and provided. There's paperwork for completing and approving a memo, making sure all the funds are available. That's all kind of internal for whoever is actually paying for the program. Lots of paperwork. For this program, the University of Michigan helped us by developing that website that Shannon mentioned. And so that had our agenda, our speakers, information, all about that program. So it helped us to stay organized, but also it helped us to market the program. And that's another thing that you need to figure out is how are you going to market the program and recruit your students, who you're going to target? Do you have a flyer? What other information, how else are you going to get that information out to the students? And as this process keeps moving along, as the wheels keep turning, you finalize your budget because some costs do change as things become closer to the time of the event. If you need a fiduciary to help with the program, there's details involved in securing that and making sure that you communicate with them about everything that's going on. Then there's actually, once you have students recruited, making sure that the money for their participation is actually coming in. So if they're being supported through a VR agency like they were for our program, we were communicating with the counselors, making sure that all of the authorizations for those students were in hand. And then with recruiting your students, making sure all of the appropriate paperwork was on file for the students to participate. There's a lot of staffing and logistics involved in a program as well. For registration of students and developing rooming lists, you need to figure out what questions are you going to ask these students besides, do you want to participate? Because yes, it's good to know if they're interested in participating, but also you want to know some personal information about them. If they're staying in a hotel, which they were for this particular program, you need to know information that will help you develop a rooming list that will be the best fit for that group of students. You need to know how many rooms you need, communicate all that information to the hotel, and then also have an idea of what's going to happen when you arrive at the hotel on the day of. How are the students going to come in and get signed in? And how is that going to flow, getting all the students to their rooms, et cetera.
Right. And one of the things we think about, sorry, Jaclyn, one of the things we really didn't think about at first was medications, and do they take their medication independently, or are they going to need assistance with that, and are they going to need reminders? And we didn't really think about those types of things as we started out on this journey of overnight programming.
Right. Lodging, meals, and check into the hotel. So there's a lot of, Shannon did a ton of communicating with the hotel on how many rooms do we need for staff and students and speakers. They wanted to know who was specifically going to be in each room so they could have all those numbers assigned ahead of time. And meals, working with the staff to make sure that we had a menu lined up, that it was something that we could afford, that it was a diverse menu, but also something that was conducive to feeding teenagers, food that they would eat that wouldn't be incredibly unhealthy. All those details, allergy needs, the list goes on and on and on. And then when you check into the hotel, making sure that the switch is flipped so that those students can't charge anything to the room when they're by themselves with their roommates or with their chaperone. We have a staff to student ratio that we maintain throughout a program. So when we have the final number of students, we make sure that we have the appropriate number of staff members on duty at all times with the students. So our ratio is 4-to-1. So 4 students for every 1 staff person in general. Now, if there is a particular student that has some additional support needs, we also take that into account and make sure that they have the support that they need. And for a program, these programs at particular sites don't just last 8 hours in a day. Those days are long. So you need to have shifts of staff and make sure you have your schedule developed. In addition to telling the staff what their schedule is when they are on duty, we found that it's very important to outline very specifically what we expect of those staff members. What are their duties? What do they need to be doing? A lot of times for events like this conference, we had students listening to speakers and participating in group activities. So they were all in one area and the staff weren't doing something alone with students, but we still needed them to be there to observe, to corral students if necessary. Sometimes students would just feel like standing up and walking out of the room. And we needed to make sure that we had enough people to make sure that we could handle all those situations, to corral those students back in and make sure that everyone was safe. And then we have sometimes off-site visits where we are traveling. And that's when it's really important to make sure that we have specific staff members keeping very close tabs on specific students so that we can make sure everyone gets on the appropriate transportation, gets where they need to be, again, safely, and that no one gets lost. Everyone is able to participate. There are a lot of moving parts there. Coordination of transportation, that was particularly complicated for this program. We had, shall we say, a really good problem for this program in that particularly the first year that we did the program, we had a lot more students register than we were expecting, like 40 students register when we were expecting maybe 15 to 20. And that's awesome because we wanted to get this information out to as many students as possible. But because this was a pretty big program on our scale, transportation was tough because we could not transport everybody, all the students and staff, from A to B in one bus. So we actually had to have like a shuttle that picked up one load of people and then picked up the second load of people. So again, keeping tabs on all those students was extremely important. I mentioned earlier, speaker transportation and lodging, just making sure all those details were in place. For this program, we brought in speakers from out of state. So there was a lot of travel coordinating taking place, flying across country for some of these people. So our program highlights, after we juggled all these details and got everything organized finally, we had an awesome program. And some of the highlights were this. On our first day, our keynote speaker was president of the NFB, Mark Riccobono, and he did a great job of speaking to our students about how to be a driver in your own life rather than a passenger in your own life. So taking action rather than, you know, passively allowing your life to kind of pass by. So he was very motivating. We also had our speaker, Lindsay Teal. She was a policy advisor for the Office of Disability Employment Policy in the Department of Labor. And she spoke to our students about job opportunities, but also how they can prepare themselves for the world of employment. And she was also a person with a visual impairment. So that was a great mentor for our students to interact with. One of my favorite aspects of this program was a networking lunch with M-City leadership. One of the cool things about this conference that we did was that at the University of Michigan, at the same time, there was another conference going on with leaders in industry through M-City. So people in industry who develop all these different components for autonomous vehicles were all coming together to discuss the technology and developments in the field. And so during their conference and our conference, we were able to intersect and have everyone come together for a networking luncheon. This was really great because we wanted it to be an opportunity for our students and those industry leaders to really talk with each other and learn from each other. So the students could talk with the industry leaders and learn more about the technology, ask their questions, but also those industry leaders could ask questions of our students who, being blind or visually impaired and young and entering the workforce, these people are interested in this technology and could be potential users of this technology. So it was an opportunity for them to learn from this population of people and take what they learned back to their work. As a teacher, it was really fun because when those students walked into that luncheon room, it was set out quite formally. There were tablecloths. It was a more formal place setting. The food was excellent. And so before the industry leaders arrived, we had everybody sit down. We had a couple students, staff, and industry leaders kind of assign seats at each table. So there was a good mix. And the students were taking the things very seriously. You could see those soft skills run through their brain of, okay, how do I use appropriate etiquette? Where does the napkin go? Let's make sure that I don't knock over my drink. And so this became very real to them very quickly, why first impressions matter and that they wanted to use their networking skills successfully. Later, we had an HR presentation by someone from General Motors, and he talked about General Motors' efforts to encourage diversity in their company and some of the things that they are looking for in upcoming employees. We also had kind of as a second keynote for our second day, a Paralympic athlete and our former customer, Tyler Marin, talked to the students about how to set high goals for yourself in life, how to reach down inside yourself and bring out that champion within you. Finally, we did go to M-City. We had the students explore an autonomous shuttle. They were able to ride in another shuttle. So while some students were taking rides around the campus, other students were able to walk into a shuttle that was stationary and feel all of its components so that it seemed more real to them. And they visited a 3D print lab on the University of Michigan campus so they could learn about that technology and how it is involved in producing prototypes and other parts for a lot of manufacturing in current times.
Sure. And the picture on the screen is actually our students at the 3D print lab. It was really cool to see kind of, they had a bunch of different 3D printers, some that could do very intricate work and then some that were a little bit more basic. So the students really enjoyed that component. But of course, they love the autonomous shuttle. And I just have to share because I thought it was so cool. You know, Jaclyn said they got to go in the shuttle and explore it. But the controller in the shuttle, because they did have to have a live human in there just in case. And so the controller was an Xbox controller. So I thought that was kind of cool. So collaboration. So here's where, you know, kind of you start putting everything together. So one of the things that we did, you know, after we determined our program objectives, what we wanted to accomplish, and kind of, you know, teased out some of that information, then we started looking at, you know, how do we leverage the partners that we have in the room, maybe their relationships, you know, how do we really make all of this come together and happen for our students, right? So
yeah. Everyone has something unique to bring to the table.
Exactly. Like we had this was a large planning team, because we kept thinking we needed some more people. So, you know, the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons, or BSBP, as it's on the slide, you know, we had access to this funding through WIOA, through our VR funds, to provide these types of experiences to students where they're exploring different careers. So we had our Pre-ETS funding. We had access also to previous customers of ours that were blind and visually impaired. We also had a speaker that also used to be one of my clients who, you know, he works in the auto industry. He's a manager of a supply chain company. And so he was able to come in and talk about his perspective and his role. And of course, we had the participants, the students, right? And we also had most of the staffing came down to BSBP staff and or contracted staff. The University of Michigan, we could have never done this without them. They were so wonderful. They also had a relationship with M-City. It is not that easy to get yourself onto the grounds of M-City. It's locked up pretty tight. They don't want people just wandering around there.
They want names of who's entering, vehicle descriptions, details.
So, I mean, and you know, this is a cool spot, guys. I mean, this is, it's like, it almost looks like a movie set. So imagine like there's these different little buildings, there's a roundabout there. I mean, any kind of traffic situation that you might encounter is set up. You know, they said they have the shortest railroad tracks. And they also said that shuttle would stop for a squirrel. So we didn't test that out, but I believe them. So we have the M-City Leadership Council as well. Those are all the people that they come together for this, I think twice a year conference, where all the AV leaders and industry researchers, people who are developing, you know, not only the vehicle themselves, but the stop signs and, you know, all of the things that go into making these things work, come to this Congress meeting. And it just, we aligned our program with this meeting so that we could do that business lunch with those professionals. We also had access to campus resources. So we were able to utilize some of the campus buses to get our students back and forth from the hotel to campus, to go to the 3D lab, to go to M-City. And then we also had access to the 3D print lab. Advocacy groups and family groups. So one of the things that they really brought to the table was, you know, these relationships with national speakers. We were able to, you know, kind of tie into, you know, who do you know? One gal who was on our team is the one who happened to have a contact with the human resource department at GM. So, you know, she was able to reach out. So we basically, you know, kind of looked at who do we know? Who on the team do we know? Not everybody, you know, we had a personal relationship with. And then we kind of split up the ones that we didn't. Like Lindsay Teal, I don't believe anybody actually had a relationship with her. For those of you who don't know of Lindsay, she's also an individual who is visually impaired herself, and she was working for ODEP, but most lately she works for the Department of Transportation at the national level, and has been doing a lot with policy and legal pieces related to autonomous vehicles. And then some additional funding. So one of the things that we were able to use our Michigan parents group to do is they were actually able to pay for some of the parents to attend the program that and a couple of the students that weren't 14. So for pre-ETS, you have to be 14, and we did have a couple students at 13 that attended. All right, so is this my slide still? 21, yep. Yes. Okay. Program evaluation. So one of the other things that we wanted to look at is, how did we do? Did we do a good job? Did we did we meet what we set out to accomplish? So ahead of time, we developed some questions. University of Michigan staff was able to access their iClickers and set up the survey and run it for us, and then give us some beautiful printouts. The iClickers are great because they are accessible. A lot of them have Braille on them. They also have that haptic feedback coming in. So those iClickers, was something that they use in the university all the time. We actually ended up purchasing some for our unit so that we could use them for surveys moving forward.
Yeah, it makes it really easy to analyze all the data and, have some statistical representations of what your results are.
Absolutely. So, and we wanted to get the feedback of the students and the staff to really help to inform our planning committee. We did this a second time. The year that we're speaking of primarily was the first year, but we did do it a second year. Had pretty good success, and had hoped to do it yet again. And I still hope we can do it another time, but because it really is a great program for the students, and we really did enjoy it, and develop some really good relationships with the University of Michigan. So what did we learn? We learned that our students really enjoyed the hands-on activity, which is probably not a surprise. They would have liked a little bit more opportunity for group discussions. Instead of so many different speakers talking to them, they would have liked a little bit additional time to maybe process the information in a group, small groups, something like that. We learned, they learned a lot about the opportunity for employment in the auto industry and about the technology around autonomous vehicles. And so from the process, what we learned is our planning team probably met way more than we should have, right? We needed more structure. Jackie's laughing at me because she knows that's not my best thing, is not structure, right? So we needed more structure moving forward. We wanted to be able to replicate programs, and we knew that would be a challenge because of how many moving parts there were and how much detail had to go into it and how much work had to go into it ahead of time. We also realized that our staff roles could be a little bit more defined. So, that was good information for the next time. The next time we did it, we actually did give staff a little bit more guidance on, what are you supposed to be doing while you're here? You're not just supposed to sit in the back of the room. Like if you see a student get up and leave, and they don't come back, you might have to go find them, right? So it's a little tricky when you're doing programs in hotels. And we also felt like, we really needed some tools to be developed as we keep running more programs to keep us on track, to keep us on point, and to keep me organized. So I kind of wish Sue was talking about this slide because basically, she said it was a brain dump. So we took the information that we had and we talked through it and we worked through it, and God bless her, Sue put it all together and helped us to organize it and get it on paper so that we could recreate it moving forward. We also determined some key check-in points. So if staff were doing this outside of the pre-ETS team, groups of school staff and VR staff were working together to put together a local program, they would have some check-in points where they would check back in with the transition team just to make sure everything was aligning with pre-employment transition, to see if they had any questions or needed help resourcing something. We also developed a checklist, which we're going to show you next, for staff to use throughout the process, and the budget template, which is probably like the holy grail of our toolkit, because it is pretty amazing how it breaks down the cost for the whole program and then individual costs. And we also created a check-in and a process for registering students and marketing materials. So we want to make sure that We have all the appropriate memos, approvals, budgets in place before we start getting students to sign up. So this is on the right, and you should have the full file of this document. I just took a screenshot of the first couple of steps. So I'm not going to go through entire step-by-step guide, but it is basically a step-by-step process for staff as they're trying to develop programs. So starting out with the concept and then consulting back with the pre-ETS team, is this a good idea? Is this something we should move forward with? And then they start developing their planning team. And basically it goes through all of the steps that we've covered here today. And so we've got flow from planning to concept to implementation. And we also have some built-in checkpoints, as I mentioned earlier. We wanted to have those built-in checkpoints so that if staff, was kind of heading in a bad, not a bad direction, but headed in a direction that we as an agency couldn't support with pre-ETS funds, we wanted them to have a course correction before they got too far down the process.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Jackie's going to talk a little bit about some of the overview of the budget template, and then Sue's going to actually share her screen so you can see it.
All right, so as Shannon said, our budget template, this is by far my favorite tool that we developed for implementing programs because, again, if you've done a program before, there's no one way to write a budget, or, well, now there is, we developed it, but there wasn't one way to write a budget. And so if it was a really basic program, there were times that Shannon and I just sat down. Oh, Guide Dog Liz wants to join the presentation. There were times we just sat down with paper and pen and we're, writing out a list by hand of what some of our costs would be for a basic program. And for more complex programs, those budgets can be complex as well. And for myself, full disclosure, I am blind. I use a screen reader on my computer. And so when people would send me budgets and I would be looking at all these costs for services, people don't outline budgets the same way because it makes sense to them. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me. So I would be searching for data and I wasn't finding it right away. And it was difficult. And the same for some of our other visually impaired staff as well. So this budget template is a dynamic form. It allows our staff to store information in one location for each program. So also, you could have details about a program in several files on the computer or a loose leaf paper. And then you're wondering, well, where should I stick this? Where did I save it? So that budget is a one-stop shop for all of those details. So what do I mean by that? There's a cover sheet for the budget that's rather extensive. It gives you a place to write a program overview. What's kind of your basic couple sentence description of your program? What are your goals that your planning team has outlined? How many students are you expecting or hoping to have in this program? Are there vendors that you're going to be using? What are those vendors? And will you be using a fiduciary if needed? What's your administrative fee for that fiduciary? And what categories apply to the services that those vendors will be providing? What pre-ETS categories like self-advocacy or workplace readiness training? So then that spreadsheet also has places for you to write down specific information about meals and lodging, transportation, additional costs and supplies like materials for the program, staffing needs, who are your vendors, what are their fees, and is there a cost per staff member or is it a flat rate fee? And there's lots of ways that you could spin this, but if you have a way of tracking your internal costs for the program as well, those could be tied in here as well if you wanted to. We didn't so much use it for that, but that is an option. So again, this spreadsheet allows you to align all of those costs with your pre-ETS categories so that in the end you get an overall budget sheet with the cost breakdown that takes into account all the tabs for the needs of the program. And that information carries into your final budget outline, which provides you with that golden number. What's your total program cost? So you know how much money you need to get approved. And then what's your cost per student and cost per category so that we know how we're going to attribute all of those funds back to the students that are participating in the program. So now Sue is going to actually show you an example, the budget template that we developed. We took it and we populated it with some numbers that are reflective of this 21st century transportation program. So you can actually see the budget sheet in action, where it actually makes more sense, applying it to a real life scenario. And then you'll be able to understand a little bit better how you could use that sheet for your own programs.
All right, except Shannon is having technical difficulties. So
Of course.
I can't figure out how to get my meeting controls to stop sharing. They used to be at the top of my screen, and now I do not see them. So I'm not sure how to stop sharing my screen. Oh.
I just did it for you, Shannon. So,
Yeah.
all right, and I'm going to pull up mine and share mine. And so this is Sue Luzensky, and as Shannon and Jackie have both shared, the details when you're planning a program can be very overwhelming. And the budget template was built to ensure that all of our federal dollars were being accounted for, were being captured in detail, that we were meeting program objectives, and that all the details were captured in one place. Because we were trying to do binders, we were trying to keep all the materials in one place, and every program was different, and staff throughout the state were all planning programs. So
okay, Sue, can you, I don't know, Catherine, can you, is it really, it looks really blurry to me. Is it blurry to everybody else? Or does it look okay?
It looks, this is a lie. It looks fine to me.
Okay, good. Then it's just my sound probably on my screen. I
But
probably
some
mixed everything up.
other,
All right, sorry, go along, Sue.
okay, no, that's okay. So what this budget template did is it solved a few problems. It gave us the ability to have a more accurate estimated budget when we were beginning to plan programs. And it also gave us a true budget at the end. Staff are not budget experts. We don't expect them to be. And the budgets we were getting for programs were all over the map as far as what would be turned in, as far with details and what categories were being covered for pre-ETS programs. So, so what we created was
there's some, I'm sorry, Sue, there's some people asking if you can make it bigger.
I can try. If some of my numbers disappear, then just let me know. Let's see.
And people are saying it's a little blurry, but I mean, even through the blur, I think it's not, it looks cloudy, but I can still see what it says. It says somebody made a recommendation to make it full screen. So maybe that would make it bigger.
So there's my full screen right there. And I had made it larger because just so that we could see it. Now it won't let me change the percentage. It's at 130% right now. So, you know, we can make this available to people afterwards. And I'm just going to do a high level overview. Okay, thank you. So this budget template was built in Excel, and it's got 12 tabs on the bottom, and each tab that you fill in is asking for specific information. And as you fill these tabs in, it builds your budget so that when you get to the, I think it's the 10th tab, you actually have a budget that is locked, and it's been built because you're filling in the information from the previous tabs. So it really helps staff to just be able to concentrate, not be overwhelmed, and concentrate on just, you know, maybe I just have the vendor information, and so they're able to put the information in. So, but the first tab is the cover sheet. And as you can see, you've got your program name, your date of event, your staff contact information. There is a overview of what the program is supposed to be, and then your program goals. So it kind of, as Jackie said, it just lays it out in one spot. So then there is a line that says projected budget, but that also grows and changes as you fill in the other tabs as you move along building the program. So you've got your projected number of students, you've got your hotel names or your facility names where it's going to be held. And then there's just questions that you answer along the way, the scope, if it's statewide or if it's just a regional program. Vendors, so if you have, like here, we filled in the Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living. And then we've also got pull down menus where you can choose one of the 5 categories, because anybody who is a vendor should be providing one of the 5 categories that's a part of the Pre-ETS programs. So, and then here's the fiduciary, which we used for this particular program, NFB of Michigan. And the fiduciary, the beauty about that is, so maybe you have a bunch of smaller pieces that you're bringing together. Running it through a fiduciary allows you to not have to pay a bunch of little bills, maybe because they're doing that function, that bill paying function for us. And they may be doing a registration, they may be, there's pieces and parts. And so that's why we're able to add an admin fee up to 10% of the total cost of the program. And again, within the fiduciary, whoever we're running, whether it's transportation or running the hotel costs, then we're making sure that we're capturing what Pre-ETS categories are being provided by what services. So, but again, moving on, we've got the registration deadline, we've got staffing needs, or we're going to need internal staff or external staff. As Jackie said, we've got 1 staff person for every 4 participants. And so, you know, we need to make sure that we plan that correctly. Is there going to be overnight accommodations, transportation needed, whether it's for 1 participant or all the participants? So, and then the memo approval date's just something that's internal for us. So really the cover sheet is a total snapshot of what you have going on for this program. And you don't need to put all of it in at the same time. As you're building the program, as you're planning the program, then you can just keep adding information. So then here, the second tab is just a contact information, whether it's the planning committee members, which, you know, could be some internal members to BSBP or external members, but also then program contacts. So you might have your fiduciary, all your vendors, all the pieces and parts of people who are providing services during the program. And you've got their contact right here. So the other beauty of this whole budget process, or this whole budget template, is that you can share this with people who are providing the services the day of, or if it's a 3-day program, because even though you helped plan this, you may not be the one that's there, or you may not be lead all the time in this 3-day program. So it helps to just be able to share this, and then everybody has the same information. So the next is if we have vendors. So again, we used on the front page, we had put in Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living, and they were providing workplace readiness training. And so now I didn't put a dollar amount in here, but if I did, it would transfer over to the budget tab, and we'll get there and see all the costs. But again, here, there could be a flat rate. They could charge per participant, the program participant. And then there could be an itemization in what makes up their rate. And so that you're able to capture all of this. So here is where on that cover sheet, I put in the Holiday Inn and the Microtel, and now that has carried over just to the name. So then I'm able to put in that the cost of the room per night, the number of rooms we're going to need. So let's say, so at this hotel, we had to break it up in between 2 hotels. So this one had 13 rooms available. And just for explanation's sake, I just put that we stayed 1 night. So then that does all the calculations for you. You can put in the facility fees, the occupancy taxes, and it does all the calculation for you, figuring out what the total costs are. So I did the same thing for the microtel, and here we have total room costs for the whole program of $5,738.24. So again, here is if there's any facility fees, whether we're using a breakout room, or there's AV rental, there's the number of rooms we're using, the number of days we're using, the fees, the taxes, and it calculates all that for us. The meals, again, I just did one line, so it's just got a description, the number of meals, the cost per meal, and then it does the calculation for you. But truly, like with this program, there was a 3-day, it was 3 days long. So truly you would have maybe breakfast, day one, or lunch day one, and you'd have how many meals you needed, the cost per the meal, and you could go down all the way, and it would just, you put in all the itemized details, and then it's calculating for you. If you added gratuity, if you had sales tax or service fees. So it truly just does the work for you. Again, now the next tab is the transportation tab. So here we use the U of M charter bus system and the Golden Limo bus. So this, you've got a per person rate, the number of people, or there's a flat rate with a number of trips. Michigan's very rural, so we may use a charter bus or some kind of a transportation system for one person just to get them to a program. And so, it's nice because not every program's the same, and we can make this fit what we need for whatever program that we're putting on. It's very flexible. So our next tab is the miscellaneous tab. And for that tab, we were able to put in a speaker fee, some extraneous supplies. We had t-shirts that we had bought. We needed to purchase our own materials to use the U of M 3D print lab. And so we were able to put that in the miscellaneous, and here again, you can use that for whatever you need to use it for. That doesn't fit into some other category. So here is on the fiduciary tab. So we had put in that NFB was our fiduciary. So the information that we put on the cover sheet under that fiduciary spot has automatically filled in here and picked up those costs that we're going to run through the fiduciary. So there's our admin fee, there's our lodging, facility, meals, transportation, and our miscellaneous fees. And so the total responsibility that will be run through the fiduciary is this $21,000 and some change. So then we're also able to break it out where we have it calculated based on the number of students that we had estimated. And again, you can go back to the cover sheet and say, okay, we thought we were going to have 39 students. We only have 35. So you can change that. The whole spreadsheet will recalculate based on, what you have ended up having for registrants. So it's the cost per category. And here we had 4 categories of Pre-ETS services that we were running through the fiduciary. So that's the cost per category is the $5,265 cost per student based on 39 students. And then it calculates it down cost per student per category based on the 4 categories being provided by the fiduciary or through the fiduciary. So, and then finally, here is our total budget. This is actually a locked screen and it just fills in. So here are our final numbers. like under the vendor, I had put the Ann Arbor CIL. If I had put $100, that $100 would show up here. And then this would be recalculated down here for the total program cost. So here's all of our numbers throughout from all the other tabs. Here's the program cost. In this instance, we don't have any money flowing through a vendor. So it all flows through the fiduciary. And we're doing 5 categories, applying 5 categories of the Pre-ETS services. Here's the breakout of the cost per category. And then here's our 5 categories, and we're actually able to break out the cost and see the cost per student. So this is where this is really helpful for staff, because then they go back and they know that when they have a student that's theirs that is registered for this program, this is the authorization amount that they need to put in that program within the case management system. And so that's the beauty of that. Then this is a page, internal costs, that we haven't implemented yet, but because we have a training center, and we also have staff providing program services, we're going to be implementing this at a future program to break out, so we can put some of those costs that we are absorbing through staff time or through our facility or through providing meals at our facility, that we can authorize those dollar amounts against the 15% Pre-ETS money that we have to spend. So, and then just to round out the whole template, and so that you truly have like an electronic binder, if we use like Google Docs for registration for any programs, we're able to download that information and download it to an Excel spreadsheet, and then just copy or put that information into this document, so we truly have the information all in one spot. So this is all the registration, and we don't have any headers or columns on here because every program is different. We may be asking different questions. We're going to collect different information based on what the program is. So, so basically that's it in a nutshell. It really, it's a beautiful thing. It was an idea that just kept evolving, and we're very happy with how it turned out. We're hoping to get back to in-person services so that we can really start utilizing the budget template and just start providing in-person services. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. That budget template is pretty complex. And if you do use it, one of the things, it might be a little confusing why there's a vendor tab and then why there's all those other tabs. The vendor tab is like a flat rate that we would pay for a particular service that would not go through the fiduciary. So when we were building this, we had to go, okay, well, some of them have the fiduciary costs and some of them don't. So that's our way of, separating out which ones actually have something attributed to the fiduciary. And then the other thing is, Sue mentioned, that has the ability to break it out by the 5 Pre-ETS categories. And one of the things that's really important about that is, initially when we started running programs, we said, okay, well, what are we doing most of during this program? And we put everything under workplace readiness. Well, then when it came down to reporting our on our 9/11 to RSA, the services that we're providing, those additional services we were providing in those other categories were never captured. So in order to actually capture them in our case management system, we have to break it down and make sure that we are saying during this program, we are doing all 5 categories, or we're doing 3 of the 5 categories, because you want to make sure that your federal report is accurate and that that information is getting back when we do that. So I'm going to turn it over for questions. I know there was a couple in the chat.
There was one about bioptic driving, one about the role of NFB, and then the last one was about funding.
Okay. So as far as, let's see, I'm going to read them. Other than the parent funding, under 14-year-old participants funding, did everything else fit? Yes. So the only thing that did not fall in those 5 categories of pre-employment transition was those additional participants. And we did have some costs incurred for some of the volunteers, but we were able to attribute that because they were helping to staff the program. I can't find the other questions. Let's see. Does the state of Michigan use Pre-ETS funds, fund Pre-ETS age low vision students to participate in in-state formalized bioptic driver training programs?
Yeah.
No. Pre-ETS services are meant to be general in nature. They're not meant to be individualized. So we are not able to purchase bioptics, glasses, anything that's individualized to that student. Now, if somebody came and talked to a group of students about bioptic driving as kind of a general overview, then certainly that might be able to be considered a workplace readiness part of a training, but actual individualized formal driving training with Pre-ETS funds, no. Can you speak more to the role of NFB? You want to take that one, Jaclyn?
Sure.
In the actual event itself.
So the NFB, I mean, they did a lot of things. In planning the event, we talked about all of the connections that they brought. They actually had the initial idea, and they just did a lot to help manage those details throughout the planning process. During the program itself, they were there at the program. So they were representing the NFB. They were speaking to the students about the importance of skills of blindness, the importance of Braille skills, the importance of independent travel skills, and the importance of all of these skills of blindness for becoming an independent, confident adult who can eventually become competitively and integratedly employed. So our missions match in that we want our students to be as successful as possible. And so they were there to really drive home that message as well, that these skills are important and you need to see for yourselves, make that informed decision why these skills are important and what you need to do in order to develop these skills to reach the goals that you want to set for yourself. And we did have a session with one of the staff members at the University of Michigan who had been involved in the NFB, who had been a person with blindness, at several levels of life, who had gone through this whole process. And so they talked about the importance of these skills, some of the things that students need to do in order to be successful at the college level. So there was just a lot of cooperation going on and using those partnerships to really drive home that message from multiple angles. Am I missing anything, Shannon?
No, I don't think so. They were a great partner for us in a lot of different ways. There's another question in the chat asking, was the program specifically tailored to students with blindness and low vision, or did it include students with other disabilities? And I know somebody earlier had asked about deafblind students, and we did have 2 deafblind students the second time that we did the program. However, neither one of them utilized an interpreter. They were brothers, and neither one of them utilized an interpreter, but had an interpreter been needed, absolutely, we would have paid for that. We can pay for that using the auxiliary services under pre-employment transition. And then, yes, it was tailored specifically to students who are blind and low vision. Michigan has 2 VR agencies, and so we only serve individuals who are blind and visually impaired. In the future, we could potentially add students with other disabilities, but I think we had a large enough group that we wouldn't have wanted to include anybody else. And I think that's it in the questions, unless there's anything I'm missing.
Shannon, this is Richard again with APH and Connect. I want to thank you, Sue and Jaclyn, for an outstanding presentation. And if you want to keep an eye on the chat box for a minute as we kind of conclude, that's fine. And I just want to thank everyone for participating. And I briefly Just want to quickly mention this webinar is part of our National Transition Conversation series with Career Connect. And a lot of you might be with us for the first time, and or if you're looking for Career Connect, I get this all the time. We are at aphcareerconnected.org. So when you're going to Career Connect, make sure you put APH in front of that address and you'll get there. I can't tell you how many times people ask me, I haven't found it. So our National Transition Conversation, our webinars like this with rehab colleagues, transition coordinators, TVIs in mind, where we have discussions like we did today, talking about pre-employment transition services and all the hot topics, all the hot button issues that are relevant to our population, serving students as young as age 14 who are working through rehab, vocational rehabilitation, the education system, summer work experience. If you have ideas or suggestions for us, please let us know. Send Catherine, Elia, or myself an inquiry and let us know. And one of the things I want to part with is our National Transition Conversation listserv, which is a free list, and you're all invited to join in the chat box right now. Make sure.
And I will just say there was one last slide, Richard, that I threw up on the screen.
Sure.
It's just got a couple of links to resources, so you will have access to this. But there's basic information. It's on the WinTAC website, which for those of you who are in VR know that WinTAC is changing to the NTAC, the National Transition Association or Transition Center, the collaborative. I got to get used to their new name. All their resources will be moving at some point, but it's still at the WinTAC site. And there is an amazing Pre-ETS community rehab partner guidebook for individuals or agencies that are trying to provide rehab services to VR students in the Pre-ETS realm. And I would encourage you to check that resource out. And then I just also put the link to the University of Michigan that set up the 21st century. So if you want to look at the speakers and all of that, you can go to that website as well.
Shannon, can you briefly address the last question somebody put in there about how do you address background checks and safety of the students when you're doing these programs and looking at staffing?
So for these particular programs, that is a really good question because that has come up a lot. And, you know, we are working on policies and procedures around, you know, doing background checks and things like that for our volunteers. As far as everybody else who worked this particular program, they were either state employees or they were paid vendors, and those vendors would handle the background checks on their end. But the bulk of the staffing was done by state employees, so that would be covered through the Office of the State.
Fantastic. And I just put in the chat box, everybody, the way to subscribe to our National Transition Conversation list. I invite you all to participate or send to your colleagues in VR if they're not with us right now. We really want you to participate, work with us for the future webinars and ideas. And where I know Elia or Catherine will put in the closing code in just a moment. But Jaclyn, Sue, Shannon, any last words, any parting words before we wrap this up?
No, just I encourage you to go out and run some fun programs with your students. And if you have additional questions, you know, our emails were on the beginning of the slide, and Richard knows how to find us, so you can certainly reach out as well.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure being here today.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much for the